and how they were received, there was still a great life force that was present, and that was what he wanted to demonstrate in this personal and collective visual narrative. So I want to just backtrack a little bit and say to you, thank you so much, because one of the approaches that we have with our students, right, is just talk about what you see in these images. There's no right or wrong answer, you know. Talk about just the basic information that's found in the image, what the people are doing, what kind of meaning you can draw out of it. It's great if you can add more contextual hats to it, where people might have seen these images, what might have been the response of art critics or the community to these images, and how this image is a reflection of the larger visual environment that folks were encountering at the time. With this particular series, essentially it was produced. A couple of panels were produced then in Time magazine. Then it went to a modern art gallery, and then it went to these two, prestigious public institutions so that we all could encounter it, which is a great thing. Well, one of the things you want to do too is, just have your students think through, well, who saw this work? Why was it produced? What were the goals behind it? And all of our visual evidence, some ideas and opinions are all, infused in the dialogue, right, that's going on in the image, in the frame of the image. So we want to really try and draw that out as much as we can. And you all have already pointed out how accessible images can be, and kids get excited about it because they don't think that they're reading, but we know that they actually are reading. So as much as we can have them do it, with critical eyes, and think through, the deeper meanings, I think is an important exercise to do. So with that, you all have this really fantastic resource here from the Phillips collection that's tied to the touring exhibition of the panels that happened in 07 and 08. And you should read through it thoroughly and think through, how you could adapt some of the exercises here. And I know that this afternoon we'll be working more with select panels. So do you have any immediate questions about using visuals in the classroom? Yes?
I was thinking if it wasn't for the migration to the north, I don't know if the blacks then would have had the opportunity to express themselves creatively, without just still being looked at as farm hands. I mean, from this century here, we have the birth of artists and leading into the Harlem Renaissance years later, but this is the first evidence of signs of seeing other things that black people could have been capable of doing even 50 years prior to this time if they would have been given the opportunity to be artists, to be musicians, and not just to be entertainment for overseers and for masters. There was just so much more talent there, but if it wasn't for the migration to the north, I don't know if that would have ever been exposed.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because there are commonplace objects or forms of cultural production that, there's this hierarchy going on. So something like a quilt,
Right.
Initially was not embraced as fine art, worthy of exhibition, worthy to be documented, discussed, etc. And then, you see a quilt, and many of these, look at this part at the bottom there. That feels to me like a quilt. They're beautiful, they're gorgeous, they're wonderfully made, they're filled with rich histories and stories of family life and personal struggle and experience. And largely the quilts that at least I've been studying have come out of Southern experience, right? Now it's just
pieces of scraps of fabric just being tied together.
Your husband's or your son's old work clothes, or other clothing you have around the home, or bits of fabric that you used. The curtains that you made, you've got some scraps left. Crazy quilts are made out of scraps, and they're then, manifested into something that you would not even imagine could occur. And there are other forms of folk art production, wood sculptures or metal sculptures that are made and placed in people's yards and things, maybe to scare away animals or something like that. I'm not quite sure. But there are other forms of common everyday objects that then take on an art form. Yes.
I was just interested in panel 51 with as their attempts to move into new areas. You're just talking about their attempts to move out of the city into the suburbs, and then facing violence there. Like if they're moving out of like the major cities into suburbs, and then whites reacting to that.
Donna, can I jump in?
Yeah.
This is something we actually are going to watch a documentary that touches a little bit upon one particular incident of a bombing, which follows from a race riot. So Lawrence is likely talking about bombings that took place within the city before what we now designate as sort of white flight. So this would be bombings in the late teens and 1920s of neighborhoods in which migrants had moved and tried to settle. And then usually what happened is there was some precipitating conflict that led to riot, and then in some cases culminated in white residents bombing black homes.
In the cities?
In the cities.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is something that as a tactic of, I guess what we were talking about yesterday is massive resistance against migration, it continued. I think as late as the 70s, and some of you might be familiar with
In
this,
early 80s.
incident in Staten Island in which a house was burned.
It's
So this is
ancient
something that
area.
begins at around this time, but really persists.
I mean, it's interesting, the segregated housing pattern still continues, and the violence still continues, even in New York. I mean, she mentioned Staten Island. I live in Staten Island. I've definitely noticed the segregated housing patterns.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of
and the
scary
violence
that
does occur.
Yeah, I mean, to my mind, a lot of the themes and the historical understandings that this series covers resonate today. It's 60 years later, and it still has application to social justice struggles of today. And I think this was also Lawrence's intent, that there's a universal experience here to be discussed and reviewed, and that, we may look differently, but there are these common experiences that we all can share, and migration is certainly one of them, and the reasons why people migrate and what they encounter when they arrive in their new destination. So these are universal human experience themes that I'm sure is going to resonate very powerfully with the young people in all of your classrooms. So, thank you. I don't have anything else to add.